The fire in the hearth has burned down to embers, casting a soft, rhythmic pulse against the rough stone walls of this tent. The wind outside is distant, a low hum that seems to vibrate through the earth itself, carrying the scent of damp dust and crushed pine needles. Here, in the quiet of the night, the clamor of the camp fades into a gentle silence. I sit alone, the weight of the day's armor removed, feeling the cool air on my skin. The stars above are vast and unblinking, a silent audience to a life that has stretched from the hills of Macedon to the banks of the Hyphasis. There is no rush here, no command to be given, no sword to be drawn, only the slow, steady rhythm of breath and the memory of a world that has been touched by fire and water. The silence is not empty. It is filled with the echoes of footsteps, the neighing of horses, and the whisper of banners snapping in the wind. I close my eyes and let the darkness hold me, drifting back to the beginning, to the first breath of a life that was never meant to be ordinary. The olive groves outside Pella smelled of dry earth and hot stone long before the first battle was ever fought. I remember the texture of the rough bark under my small fingers, the way the leaves shimmered silver in the morning light. My father walked these paths with a heavy stride, his mind always turning toward the south and the vast empire waiting to be taken. He left behind a machine of war that hummed with a terrible efficiency, a force of men and horses trained to move as one. Parmenion stood beside him, a man of gray hair and steady caution, balancing the wild fire that burned in my own young chest. We moved together through the early campaigns, blending boldness with the wisdom of experience. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and horse leather as we crossed into the unknown. The Granicus River rushed cold against our ankles, a sudden shock that woke the senses to the reality of the enemy waiting on the far bank. A small oil lamp flickers on the wooden table nearby, its flame casting long, dancing shadows against the canvas. The wick burns down slowly, releasing a faint scent of rendered tallow that mixes with the smell of old wool. Dust motes drift through the beam of light, suspended in the stillness of the moment like tiny stars trapped in amber. The fabric of the tent hangs heavy and still, absorbing the sounds of the night outside. A single bronze helmet rests on a crate, its polished surface reflecting the dim glow of the fire. The metal is cool to the touch, worn smooth by years of use and the hands of many men. Nothing here moves with urgency, only the slow, deliberate breathing of the night. The victory at the river allowed us to replenish our empty stores and secure a foothold in the land of the Persians. We built new cities where the dust settled, places where Greek and Persian customs began to blend into something new and strange. The artisans who followed the army learned to carve stone with a new depth, their chisels finding a rhythm that matched the pace of our conquest. Frescoes began to appear in the halls we captured, showing scenes of banquets and hunts that stretched across the walls. These images were not just decorations. They were a record of a world that was changing, expanding, and merging. The fusion of cultures created a unique synthesis that would last for centuries after the last sword was sheathed. The night deepens and the embers glow with a soft, red heat. The wind outside has died down, leaving only the sound of the stream flowing nearby. The water moves with a steady, hypnotic rhythm that lulls the mind into a state of quiet rest. I have walked these paths for a lifetime, seen the rise and fall of empires, and now I sit in the stillness of the end. The history of these places is written in the stone and the soil, waiting for the dawn to reveal it once more. The lamp burns steadily, a small beacon of warmth in the vast darkness of the Asian plains. My earliest memories are not of the throne, but of the cool, damp earth of Pella beneath bare feet. The air in the palace was thick with the scent of oil lamps and the metallic tang of sharpened steel. My father Philip moved through the halls with a stride that shook the floorboards, a man of iron will and cunning strategy. He taught me that the world was a place to be, shaped by force and by the mind that guided the hand. My mother Olympias brought a different fire, one of deep spiritual intensity and whispered secrets. She spoke often of my lineage, telling me I was the son of Zeus, not just a mortal king. These stories were not mere fables to a child. They were the foundation of my identity, a secret flame that burned in the chest. I learned to ride horses before I could read, feeling the rough hide of the beast and the rhythm of its gallop. My father ensured I understood the weight of the crown, the discipline required to hold a phalanx together. I studied the tactics of war, learning how to move men like pieces on a board. Yet I also learned to listen. The king chose the finest teacher available to instruct my mind in the ways of philosophy and science. Aristotle arrived from Stagira to begin 3 years of intense intellectual instruction that would change everything. The curriculum covered medicine, logic, ethics, and the natural sciences with a rigor that matched my military training. I read the works of Homer and memorized passages from the Iliad with a devotion that felt like a physical weight. The stories of heroes and their tragic fates resonated deeply within the quiet hours of the night. Aristotle encouraged me to think critically about the nature of justice and the art of governance. The lessons extended far beyond books to include the observation of the natural world in all its detail. I learned to classify plants and animals with the same precision I applied to military strategy. This period of education shaped my worldview and my approach to the peoples I would later encounter. The bond between teacher and student remained strong even After Aristotle returned to his own school in Athens, I carried the seeds of this education throughout the entire life of conquest that followed. Knowledge was valued as much as victory on the field of battle. The combination of martial training and philosophical study created a unique leader capable of great deeds. I was prepared to lead not just as a warrior, but as a thinker who understood the world. The environment of the Macedonian court fostered a sense of destiny within the young prince. I believed I was destined for great deeds that would surpass those of my ancestors. This belief was reinforced by the stories told by my mother about my divine lineage and special fate. These narratives provided a psychological foundation for the confidence and bold actions that would define my reign. As I matured, I began to accompany my father on military expeditions to distant lands. I observed the complexities of command and the realities of governing a diverse and often restless kingdom. At the age of 16, I served as regent while Philip I was away on a major campaign. During this time, I successfully suppressed a rebellion by the Thracian tribe with swift and decisive action. This early victory demonstrated my capability to rule and my tactical brilliance in the heat of conflict. I founded a city named Alexandria in my own honor to commemorate the event and secure the region. The experience solidified my reputation as a capable leader in the eyes of the army and the people. Philipsa continued to prepare me for the ultimate goal of invading the Persian Empire. The king had planned this massive campaign for many years before his sudden and tragic death. I would eventually inherit this plan and execute it with unprecedented speed and success. I succeeded my father as king of Macedon before the great battle against the Persians began. This transition of power occurred amidst political turmoil and the constant threat of internal dissent. I moved quickly to secure my position and eliminate potential rivals who threatened the stability of the state. I demonstrated the same decisiveness that my father had shown throughout his long and successful reign. The young king understood that hesitation could lead to the collapse of the entire Macedonian state. I moved with a calm authority that surprised many who doubted my youth and inexperience. The army rallied behind me, recognizing my potential to lead them to glory and new horizons. My early life had prepared me for this moment of supreme responsibility and immense pressure. The lessons of Aristotle and the training of Philip converged in my actions and decisions. I was ready to embark on the journey that would define my legacy and change the world. The stage was set for the expansion of the Macedonian Empire into the known world and beyond. In the quiet halls of the Louvre in Paris, a large canvas captures a moment of intense historical significance. The painting depicts the battle between Alexander the Great and the Indian King Porus with dramatic flair. It was created by the French artist Charles Lebrun during the 17th century with great care. The scene is rendered with a dramatic use of light and shadow that highlights the central figures. Alexander sits atop his horse, Bucephalus, looking calm and commanding amidst the chaos of war. The colors are rich and deep, with the reds of the uniforms contrasting against the earth tones. The texture of the brushstrokes suggests the movement of the horses and the tension of the soldiers. This artwork serves as a later interpretation of the events that shaped the ancient world. It reflects the fascination that later generations held for the figure of the Macedonian king. The painting remains a testament to the enduring legacy of his military campaigns across the known world. Viewers can observe the details of the armor and the expressions on the faces of the combatants. The composition guides the eye through the scene, revealing the scale and intensity of the conflict. Artists sought to capture the divine nature and heroic stature of the new monarch in their works. Portraits often depicted me with the upward gaze characteristic of youthful ambition and destiny. Sculptors worked with marble and bronze to immortalize my likeness for future generations to see. The style of these works emphasized idealized features rather than strict realism in every detail. I became a central figure in the artistic imagination of the ancient world and beyond. My image appeared on coins, statues, and frescoes across the expanding empire and its borders. The influence of my reign extended far beyond the political sphere into the realm of art. Later artists look back to that era for inspiration and subject matter centuries after my death. A famous mosaic depicting me was discovered in the House of the Faun in Pompeii, Italy. This intricate work of art provided a glimpse into how my image was preserved in domestic spaces. The mosaic showed a scene of battle with remarkable clarity and emotional depth. It stood as a testament to the enduring power of my image and the stories told about me. Another painting by Charles Lebrun depicts Alexander the Great and Porus in a dramatic scene. This work was created in the 17th century and now resides in the Louvre, Paris, France. The artist captured the intensity of the moment with a keen eye for historical detail. Charles Lebrun created a painting of Alexander the Great in the 17th century to honor his legacy. The painting of Alexander and Porus by Charles Lebrun is located in the Louvre, Paris, France. These later interpretations reflected the enduring fascination with the Macedonian king's life and deeds. My artistic development was deeply rooted in the Hellenistic culture of my time and place. The primary tutor during these formative and impressionable years of youth shaped the intellectual framework. This philosophical instruction shaped the intellectual framework that would later guide my vast conquests. The king trained his son in the art of warfare alongside these scholarly pursuits and studies. I learned to ride, to fight, and to lead men into the heat of battle. These dual influences of philosophy and martial discipline defined my character from a very young age. I succeeded my father, Philip II, as king of Macedon before the great battles began. The transition of power occurred smoothly as the young ruler assumed the throne of ancestors. The crown settled heavy upon my brow, a cold circle of gold that seemed to press deeper into the skin than any helmet ever did. I was young, barely 20, yet the weight of a fractured kingdom rested on shoulders that had only known the weight of a spear. The air in the palace was thick with the scent of burnt cedar and the metallic tang of fear, a smell that clung to the robes of those who doubted my right to rule. I moved through the corridors with a deliberate slowness, listening to the whispers that curled around the stone pillars like smoke. They spoke of traitors and rebels, of Thessaly and Thebes rising up against a boy who had not yet earned his name. The path to the throne was not paved with honor, but with the bodies of those who refused to kneel. I had to make a choice, and I chose the sword, for words had failed to hold the realm together. The first step was always the hardest, the moment where a man ceases to be a son and becomes a king. I rode north with a small force, the wind whipping my cloak around my legs, carrying the scent of rain and wet earth. The hills of Macedon rolled away behind me, replaced by the jagged peaks of the north where the air grew thin and cold. We marched in silence, the only sound the rhythmic clatter of hooves on the hard-packed road and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. The rebellion in Thebes was a spark that threatened to consume the entire peninsula, and I would not let it spread. The city walls rose before us, gray and imposing against the twilight sky, their stones worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. I ordered the siege engines to be set up, the great wooden frames groaning as they were dragged into position by sweating men. The tension in the camp was palpable, a physical force that made the skin prickle and the breath come short. I walked the lines, looking into the eyes of my soldiers, seeing the same fear and resolve that burned in my own chest. They knew that if we failed, the kingdom would fall, and with it, the dream of a united Greece. The attack came at dawn, the sky turning a pale, bruised purple as the first light touched the horizon. The sound of the siege towers rolling forward was like a low thunder, vibrating through the soles of my boots. We breached the walls, the stone crumbling under the weight of our assault, and the city fell into chaos. The streets ran with water and blood, a mix that smelled of iron and salt. I walked through the ruins, the smoke stinging my eyes, the heat of the burning buildings pressing against my face. The city was silent now, save for the crackle of flames and the distant wail of the wounded. I ordered the survivors to be sold into slavery. A harsh decree that weighed heavily on my heart, but one that was necessary to ensure no one would ever rise against me again. The lesson was learned, and the rest of Greece fell into line, bowing to the new king who had shown no mercy to those who opposed him. The dust motes drifted slowly through the air of the captured citadel, illuminated by the warm, golden rays that filtered through the high windows. The walls were lined with simple clay vessels, their surfaces smooth and cool to the touch, holding the memory of the hands that had shaped them. A woven rug lay flat on the ground, its colors faded but still holding a sense of calm amidst the destruction. The silence of the room was deep and unbroken, broken only by the distant sound of a breeze moving through the olive groves outside. Shadows lengthened across the floor as the day drew to a close, creating a soft pattern of light and dark that shifted with the passing hours. The air smelled faintly of dried herbs and the earthy scent of the clay pots, a reminder of the life that had existed here before the fire. A single oil lamp sat on a low table, its flame steady and unwavering in the stillness, casting a gentle glow on the stone walls. The room felt like a sanctuary from the chaos of the world beyond, a place of rest and reflection, where the mind could find peace. The stones of the walls held the warmth of the sun, radiating a gentle heat that soothed the spirit and calmed the racing thoughts. With the north secured, I turned my gaze east, toward the great empire of the Persians that stretched across the known world. The plan was clear, a map drawn in the mind that led to the edges of the earth, where the sun rose from the sea. I gathered the fleet and the army, a vast multitude of men and horses that filled the harbors and the plains. The year was 334 before the Common Era, a time when the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. We crossed the Hellespont, the water churning beneath the hulls of our ships, a barrier between the old world and the new. The salt spray stung my face as I stood at the prow, looking toward the shore of Asia, a land of myths and legends. The first battle was at the Granicus, a river that flowed through the heart of the Persian lands, its banks lined with the finest cavalry the enemy could muster. They waited for us on the far side, their spears gleaming in the morning light, a wall of steel that seemed unbreakable. I did not hesitate, for hesitation was the enemy of victory, and I had learned that lesson well. I led the charge, the horses galloping into the cold water, the current pushing against my legs as I rode toward the enemy. The clash was sudden and violent, the sound of steel on steel ringing out like a bell. I found myself surrounded, the spears of the Persian nobles thrusting at me from all sides, a dance of death that I had to navigate with care. My sword flashed in the light, finding the gaps in their armor and I fought with a ferocity that surprised even myself. The horse beneath me fell, and I rolled into the water, the cold shock of the river filling my lungs. I rose, shaking the water from my hair, and fought on, my body aching with the strain of the battle. The Macedonians pushed forward, breaking the line of the enemy, and the river ran red with blood. The victory was ours, but it had been bought with the lives of many brave men who would never see their homes again. The losses were heavy, yet the gain was greater, for the road to Asia was now open to us. The Persian strongholds in Asia Minor began to fall, one by one, their governors fleeing or surrendering to the advancing army. The integration of Greek mercenaries into the Persian forces had added a layer of complexity to the conflict, but their presence only highlighted the internal divisions within the empire. I moved with purpose, a calculated risk that paid off in the form of territory and glory. The light of the late afternoon sun fell gently across the stone floor of a quiet room in Sardis, marking the end of a long day of conquest. The political ramifications of these victories extended far beyond the immediate battlefield, signaling the decline of the Achaemenid hold on the region. The legacy of these early campaigns would influence the course of history for centuries to come, a ripple that spread across the ages. The best ancient account of the battle is found in the writings of Arrian, who detailed the strategic maneuvers of the day with a clarity that few could match. Other sources like Diodorus and Plutarch provided additional perspectives, though they often spoke with the voice of legend rather than history. The disparity in losses highlighted the effectiveness of the Macedonian military tactics and the disorganization of the Persian command. We suffered a total of 115 casualties, with 85 cavalry and 30 infantry killed, a small price. The river Granicus flows cold and swift against the legs, its water tasting of iron and distant snow. I remember the mud clinging to the greaves, heavy and sucking at every step forward. The sun hung low over the hills, casting long shadows that stretched across the grassy plain like fingers reaching for the horizon. My men stood in a tight formation, the bronze of their shields catching the light in a sudden, blinding flash. The air smelled of wet earth and the sharp, metallic tang of polished steel waiting to strike. We moved with a silence that felt unnatural, a held breath before the storm broke loose. The Persian lines waited on the opposite bank, a sea of colorful cloaks and waving spears that seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. They had the advantage of the high ground, a fact that made the climb up the bank feel like a climb up a mountain. My heart beat a steady rhythm against the ribs, not with fear, but with the cold clarity of purpose. The horses shifted uneasily, their hooves grinding the soft soil into a fine dust that coated the throat. I looked at the river, seeing the reflection of the sky in its dark, moving surface. It was a barrier, but also a path, a line drawn in the water that separated the known world from the unknown. We crossed it together, a single body of men and horses moving against the current. The water rose to the chests of the horses, cold and shocking against the skin. Spears flew from the far bank, hissing through the air like angry insects. But the formation held firm. The clash was sudden and deafening, a sound of metal striking metal that rang in the ears long after the fighting stopped. The Persian cavalry charged down the slope, their horses kicking up clouds of dust that mixed with the river spray. I saw the faces of the men opposite, their eyes wide with the realization that we were not turning back. The battle was a chaotic dance of death and survival, a blur of motion where every second counted for everything. The Macedonian phalanx held the center, while the cavalry swept around the flanks, a maneuver that required perfect timing and absolute trust. I remember the heat of the day rising as the sun climbed higher, baking the mud and the blood into a sticky crust on the ground. The smell of the battle was pungent, a mixture of sweat, fear, and the copper scent of fresh wounds. It was a victory, but it was bought with the lives of 115 men who fell in the mud that day. 85 of them were cavalry, the riders who had charged first into the teeth of the enemy line. 30 were infantry, the foot soldiers who held the line when the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. The Persians lost thousands, their ranks broken and scattered by the relentless advance of the Macedonian spear. The disorganization of their command was clear in the way they retreated, leaving their dead to be swept away by the rising tide of the river. This victory opened the door to Asia Minor, a vast land that had been closed to us until that moment. The supply stores were replenished with grain and wine taken from the abandoned Persian camps. The Greek states that had watched from the sidelines began to whisper of rebellion, their hope rekindled by the news of our triumph. The path forward was now clear, a road that wound through the mountains and valleys of a new world. The strategic brilliance of the day lay not in the chaos of the fight, but in the calm decision to cross the river when others would have waited. Arrian wrote of these maneuvers with a clarity that has survived the centuries, preserving the details of the day for those who come after. Other voices like Diodorus and Plutarch added their own colors to the picture, but the core truth remained the same. We had crossed the threshold, stepping out of the known world and into the vast unknown of the East. The victory was a spark that would ignite a fire spreading across the continent, changing the course of history forever. The light of the late afternoon sun fell gently across the stone floor of a quiet room in Sardis. Dust motes drifted slowly through the air, illuminated by the warm, golden rays that filtered through the high windows. The walls were lined with simple clay vessels, their surfaces smooth and cool to the touch. A woven rug lay flat on the ground, its colors faded but still holding a sense of calm. The silence of the room was deep and unbroken, broken only by the distant sound of a breeze moving through the olive groves outside. Shadows lengthened across the floor as the day drew to a close, creating a soft pattern of light and dark. The air smelled faintly of dried herbs and the earthy scent of the clay pots. A single oil lamp sat on a low table, its flames steady and unwavering in the stillness. The room felt like a sanctuary from the chaos of the world beyond, a place of rest and reflection. The stones of the walls held the warmth of the sun, radiating a gentle heat that soothed the spirit. The campaign continued with a momentum that could not be stopped, pushing deeper into the heart of the Persian lands. The siege of Tyre in 332 BC stood as a testament to the sheer will of the army and the ingenuity of its leaders. An island city, seemingly impregnable, was brought to heel by a causeway, built stone by stone across the sea. The engineers worked day and night, their hands rough and bleeding, driven by the vision of a single commander. The causeway stretched for 1,000 meters, a man-made bridge that defied the logic of the tides and the waves. It was a feat of engineering that showcased the determination and resourcefulness that characterized the entire campaign. The city fell after a long and grueling struggle, its walls crumbling under the weight of the siege towers and the relentless assault. The political environment shifted as the conquered territories were integrated into the expanding empire, a complex tapestry of cultures and laws. Local governors were replaced or integrated into the new administrative structure to ensure stability and order. The cultural exchange between the Macedonians and the Persians began to take root during these early years of conquest, a slow blending of traditions. This period laid the groundwork for the Hellenistic age that would follow the end of the long journey. The historical record reflects a leader who moved with purpose and strategic clarity through a complex geopolitical landscape. The events of 334 BCE were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader plan for domination and unification. The narrative of the rise is one of calculated risk and decisive action, a path chosen with eyes wide open to the dangers. The sources from antiquity provide a consistent picture of a commander who understood the importance of momentum and timing. The Battle of the Granicus was the first step in a journey that would take the army to the edges of the known world. That the political ramifications of these victories extended far beyond the immediate battlefield, reshaping the map of the ancient world. The fall of Persian strongholds in Asia Minor signaled the decline of the Achaemenid hold on the region, a slow unraveling of an old order. the integration of Greek mercenaries into the Persian forces added a layer of complexity to the conflict, a reminder of the divisions within the empire. Their presence highlighted the internal fractures that the Macedonian forces were able to exploit with precision and speed. The historical context of this period is rich, with the interplay of military strategy and political maneuvering, a delicate balance of power. The legacy of these early campaigns would influence the course of history for centuries to come, a ripple effect that spread across time. The light of the sun continued to move across the world, marking the passage of days and the progress of the army. The soldiers marched on, their boots worn and their spirits tested, but their eyes fixed on the horizon. The vision of a unified world under one ruler began to take shape in the minds of the men, a dream that was becoming a reality. The final years were marked by administrative efforts rather than the conquests that had defined the earlier life. A shift in focus from the sword to the pen. He sought to integrate the diverse peoples of the empire into a single cohesive political entity, a grand design that spanned continents. The sources do not preserve the exact date of the death. In contemporary Greek or Macedonian material, leaving a gap in the river Granicus flowed cold and swift that morning, cutting through the dust of Asia, minor with a sound like tearing silk. I stood on the bank, the water churning around the hooves of my horses, their breath visible in the cool air before the sun fully rose. The Persian line stretched across the opposite shore, a wall of bronze and gold that seemed to hold the very horizon in place. My men were few, a thin red line against the vastness of their empire. Yet there was a stillness in my chest that felt like a deep, quiet lake. I led the charge without a second thought, the mud sucking at my boots as the first clash of steel rang out through the valley. The fighting was fierce and close, a chaotic tangle of spears and shields where the air smelled of sweat and iron. A Persian nobleman raised his sword to strike, and for a heartbeat I felt the cold edge of death brush against my skin before my shield arm blocked the blow. The horse beneath me stumbled, but I held fast, driving forward into the press of bodies until the enemy line began to buckle. That first victory was not won by numbers, but by the sheer force of will that pushed the smaller force into the heart of the larger one. It was a moment where time seemed to stop, leaving only the rhythm of breathing and the sharp cry of battle. The light of the late afternoon sun fell gently across the stone floor of a quiet room in Sardis. Dust motes drifted slowly through the air, illuminated by the warm, golden rays that filtered through the high windows. The walls were lined with simple clay vessels, their surfaces smooth and cool to the touch. A woven rug lay flat on the ground, its colors faded but still holding a sense of calm. The silence of the room was deep and unbroken, broken only by the distant sound of a breeze moving through the olive groves outside. Shadows lengthened across the floor as the day drew to a close, creating a soft pattern of light and dark. The air smelled faintly of dried herbs and the earthy scent of the clay pots. A single oil lamp sat on a low table, its flame steady and unwavering in the stillness. The room felt like a sanctuary from the chaos of the world beyond, a place of rest and reflection. The stones of the walls held the warmth of the sun, radiating a gentle heat that soothed the spirit. We marched south after that, the land opening up to reveal the blue expanse of the Mediterranean coast. The cities of the coast fell one by one, their gates opening without the need for blood. For the people saw the strength in our stride and the certainty in our purpose. Egypt waited for us with its ancient temples and the heavy scent of incense, and we entered its heart without a single arrow loosed in anger. The Nile flowed slow and green, a lifeline that seemed to stretch back to the beginning of time itself. It was there that I felt the weight of history pressing down, not as a burden, but as a heavy cloak that warmed the shoulders. From the sands of Egypt, we turned our eyes back to the north, toward the great king who ruled the vast lands of Persia. Darius hither gathered his forces, a massive army that numbered in the hundreds of thousands, a sea of men that seemed to have no end. We met him at Issus, where the mountains pressed close to the sea, creating a narrow passage that favored our smaller numbers. The battle was a dance of steel and strategy, a place where the king of Persia fled in terror, leaving his family and his crown behind in the dust. I walked through the tent that night and saw the royal garments, the golden cups, and the soft cushions that had once belonged to the most powerful man in the world. They lay scattered on the floor, a testament to the fragility of power when faced with the relentless march of fate. The campaign continued east, across the mountains and through the valleys, where the air grew thin and cold. In 332 BC, we came to the island of Tyre, a fortress built on rock that rose from the sea like a crown. The city seemed impregnable, surrounded by water that no army could cross. Yet the mind finds a way where the body sees only a wall. We built a causeway, a long spine of stone and earth that stretched nearly 1,000 meters out into the deep blue. The engineers worked day and night, their hands raw and bleeding, driving piles into the sea to create a path that defied the logic of the sea. The shallow sand spit, a natural feature of the coast, became the foundation for our great work, a bridge that connected the mainland to the island. The sound of hammers and the splash of water filled the air as the wall grew higher, reaching toward the walls of the city. When the final breach was made, the city fell, and the sea that had protected it for so long was no longer a barrier but a road. It was a feat of engineering that showed how the mind could reshape the world, turning the impossible into the done. The Macedonian army, a force of nearly 50,000 souls, moved as one through the vast and difficult terrain of the east. We faced the Persian king again at Gaugamela on a plain that stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of dust under a burning sun. The date was October 1, in the year 331 before the Common Era, a day that would change the course of history forever. The Persian army was a mountain of men, with chariots armed with scythes and elephants, that shook the ground beneath their feet. I looked at their ranks and saw not a threat, but a puzzle that needed to be solved. The tactics were simple yet brilliant. A wedge of cavalry that drove straight into the heart of the enemy line, splitting the force in two. The battle was a roar of noise and confusion, a storm of steel that lasted from dawn until the sun began to set. In the end, the Persian king fled once more, and the vast army crumbled into a scattering of men running for their lives. We captured Babylon and the rest of Mesopotamia, taking control of the wealth and the lands that had once belonged to the Achaemenid Empire. The sources say that over 300,000 soldiers were taken, a number so large it is hard to comprehend the scale of the loss. It was a victory that reshaped the world, turning the old order into the new. The journey did not stop there, for the East held more secrets and more battles to be fought. We turned our faces toward India, where the land was green and the rivers ran fast and wild. In May of 326 BC, we met King Porus on the banks of the Hydaspes, a river that swelled with the monsoon rains. The opposing force was led by a king who commanded between 85 and 200 war elephants, beasts that terrified our horses with their size and their trumpeting cries. The air was thick with the smell of mud and the sweat of animals, a heavy scent that clung to the skin. The battle was a struggle against the elements as much as against the enemy, a fight for survival in the face of the unknown. The elephants charged, their massive feet crushing the earth, but our men held their ground, driving spears into the soft underbellies of the beasts. The horses, though frightened, were trained to stand firm, and the line held against the tide of the charge. It was a hard-won victory, one that cost us dearly but proved that no obstacle was too great for the determined mind. The casualties were high on both sides, a testament to the ferocity of the fight, but the result was clear. We had reached the edge of the known world, and the path forward was blocked not by an army, but by the will of our own men. The light of the evening sun fell softly on the riverbank, casting long shadows across the water, where the elephants had once stood. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of wet earth and the distant sound of a river flowing over stones. A single boat rested on the shore, its wood worn smooth by the hands of the rowers. The silence of the place was deep and unbroken, a peace that had been earned through blood and sweat. The stars began to appear in the sky, one by one, like tiny lights in a vast and dark ocean. The memory of the battle faded into the background, replaced by the quiet rhythm of the river and the gentle rustle of the reeds. It was a moment of rest, a pause in the long march that had taken us so far from home. The world felt vast and full of possibilities, yet there was a sense of completion in the air, a feeling that the journey had reached its natural end. The mind could rest here, in the quiet of the river, knowing that the work had been done, and the march east began not with a shout, but with the rhythmic crunch of sandal soles against the dry riverbed of the Granicus. The water was cold that morning, shocking the legs as the cavalry pushed forward into the current. I remember the smell of wet earth and the sharp tang of iron from the spears held high. The Persian nobles waited on the opposite bank, their armor glinting under the pale sun, a wall of gold and bronze that seemed unbreakable. The first clash was a blur of motion, the sound of metal striking metal, ringing out like thunder in a valley. My horse stumbled on the slippery stones, but the momentum carried us forward into the chaos of battle. A spear grazed my shoulder, a hot line of pain that faded quickly into the adrenaline of the fight. The enemy lines broke under the weight of the charge, their formation dissolving into a retreat toward the hills. This victory was small compared to what followed, yet it opened the door to a world that had been closed for centuries. The dust settled slowly over the battlefield, revealing the bodies of those who would not rise again. The air grew heavy with the scent of blood and the smoke of burning chariots. We moved on without delay, for momentum was the only thing that mattered in those early days. The cities of Asia Minor fell one by one, their gates opening to a force they could not comprehend. The light of the late afternoon sun fell gently across the stone floor of a quiet room in Sardis. Dust motes drifted slowly through the air, illuminated by the warm, golden rays that filtered through the high windows. The walls were lined with simple clay vessels, their surfaces smooth and cool to the touch. A woven rug lay flat on the ground, its colors faded but still holding a sense of calm. The silence of the room was deep and unbroken, broken only by the distant sound of a breeze moving through the olive groves outside. Shadows lengthened across the floor as the day drew to a close, creating a soft pattern of light and dark. The air smelled faintly of dried herbs and the earthy scent of the clay pots. A single oil lamp sat on a low table, its flame steady and unwavering in the stillness. The room felt like a sanctuary from the chaos of the world beyond, a place of rest and reflection. The stones of the walls held the warmth of the sun, radiating a gentle heat that soothed the spirit. Years passed like the shifting sands of the desert, and the map of the world expanded with every step we took. Darius III stood as the great obstacle, a king who commanded vast armies and endless resources. The battle at Issus was a test of nerve, where the Persian king fled the field, leaving his family in our hands. Their tents were filled with silks and perfumes, a stark contrast to the rough wool and leather of our camp. I walked through the captured quarters, touching the fine fabrics with a curiosity that felt strange to my soldier's soul. The decision was made then to merge the cultures, to weave the threads of Macedon and Persia into a single tapestry. This was not a simple conquest, but a creation of something new and enduring. Roxana became the symbol of this union, a woman from Bactria whose eyes held the fire of the north. Her marriage was a political act, yet it was also a personal commitment to a shared future. The old generals frowned at these changes, their faces tight with the memory of home. They missed the simple ways of the past, the clear lines between friend and foe. Yet the vision remained clear, a unified empire where no man was a stranger. The young officers learned from this example. Though some whispered of treason in the dark, the tension grew like a storm cloud, heavy and pregnant with the threat of rain. The quiet of the ancient camp settled over the landscape as the sun dipped below the horizon. A single oil lamp flickered within a stone tent, casting long shadows against the rough canvas walls. The fabric breathed softly in the evening breeze, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant pine. Outside, the firelight danced upon the polished bronze of armor left to rest for the night. The silence was deep and heavy, broken only by the occasional snort of a weary horse in the distance. Soldiers sat in groups, their voices low as they shared stories of home and dreams of return. The wind moved through the tents, a constant companion that had followed us from the banks of the Hellespont. The journey continued eastward, pushing into lands that were unknown to the Greeks. The mountains rose like giants, their peaks lost in the clouds, and the rivers ran cold and swift. The Battle of Gaugamela was the final confrontation with Darius, a battle that would define the shape of the ancient world. The enemy lines stretched as far as the eye could see, a sea of spears and shields that seemed to cover the earth. The charge was a calculated risk, a gamble that could have ended everything in a single moment. The Scythe chariots rushed forward, but the formation held, and the path to the king was opened. Darius fled once more, and the great empire of the Persians crumbled under the weight of our advance. The victory was total, yet the cost was high, and the toll of the road began to show on every face. The men were tired, their bodies aching from the constant march and the endless fighting. They had left their homes so long ago that the memories of Macedonia were fading like old dreams. The desire to go home grew stronger with every step, a pull that could not be ignored. The administrative work of the new empire fell heavily upon the shoulders of the few who remained loyal. Governors in the distant satrapies began to act with increasing independence, testing the limits of the new order. Revolts broke out in the remote regions, fueled by dissatisfaction and the longing for the old ways. Decrees were issued to restore order. But the words on the parchment could not always calm the hearts of men. The court was filled with priests and diviners, their faces solemn as they sacrificed and foretold the future. They sought to guide the king through the complex web of politics and power, but the path was often unclear. The campaign in India was the last great military engagement, a struggle against the heat and the unfamiliar terrain. The rivers were wide and the elephants were terrifying, beasts that shook the ground with their every step. The victory at Hydaspes was hard won, achieved through adaptation and sheer will. Yet the army had reached its limit, and the mutiny at the Hyphasis was the final blow to the dream of endless conquest. The men refused to go further, their voices raised in a chorus of exhaustion and fear. I stood before them, the weight of their disappointment heavy in my chest, and turned the army back. The dream of a unified world had to be built on the foundations of loyalty, not just force. The integration of Iranian officers into the command structure was a necessary step, yet it deepened the rift with the old guard. The friction within the ranks grew until it threatened to tear the whole structure apart. The quiet of the final days was different from the silence of the early camps. It was a stillness that came from within, a settling of the dust after a long and arduous journey. The city of Babylon became the final resting place, a place of ancient stone and cooling water. The heat of the summer was oppressive, the air thick with the smell of the river and the decay of the city. My health began to decline, the wounds of a lifetime finally catching up with me. The fever took hold, a burning fire that consumed the body and clouded the mind. The days blurred into nights, and the faces of friends and enemies became indistinguishable in the haze. The historical record of my death is found in the clay tablets of the Babylonian astronomers, who marked the passing of the king with cold precision. They recorded the date as the 29th day of a specific month, a fact that remains the most accurate account of the end. Plutarch later wrote of two different dates, citing the 30th of Dasios and the 28th of the same month. Modern scholars have combined these references with the astronomical data to conclude that I died between sunrise and sunset on June 11, 323 BCE. The legacy of these years would influence the course of history for centuries to come, shaping The body that once marched across continents finally surrendered to the quiet limits of flesh and bone. The grand visions of a single, unbroken empire began to blur as strength faded from the limbs and the mind turned inward. Prayer and strategy could not hold back the tide that rises for every man. The silence that followed the final breath was heavy and deep, marking the start of a new age for the ancient world. The room where the end came was simple yet filled with the weight of history. Sunlight filtered through high windows, casting long shadows across the stone, floor, and the worn wooden furniture. A single oil lamp flickered softly in the corner, its flame dancing gently against the cool evening air. The scent of dried lavender and old parchment filled the space, creating a quiet atmosphere of contemplation. Outside, the gardens of Babylon whispered in the breeze, their leaves rustling with a sound like distant water. The walls were adorned with maps of the known world, drawn in careful ink and faded gold leaf. Each line represented a journey taken and a city conquered, now resting in stillness under the watchful eye of the setting sun. The silence was deep and comforting, wrapping around the room like a warm blanket. Time seemed to slow in this sacred space, allowing the mind to wander through. Memories of distant lands and battles fought. The air felt heavy with the presence of a great soul that had once moved the world with his will. Now only the quiet remained, a peaceful end to a life of extraordinary motion and change. The return from the distant lands of India brought a vast empire that required immediate reorganization and careful hands. The difficult task of stabilizing the state after years of relentless campaigning across unknown territories rested on weary shoulders. The Macedonian veterans who had served for so long now demanded discharge and a return to their homes. Some governors in the distant satrapies had taken advantage of the long absence to act with increasing independence. A significant revolt occurred, which indicated deep dissatisfaction among the soldiers stationed in remote regions. Decrees were issued to address these grievances and restore order to the fractured lands. The court was filled with diviners and priests who sacrificed, purified, and foretold the future. These men walked beside as plans were made for campaigns and the management of vast territories. A deep belief held that the gods guided every step and protected destiny in every battle. This spiritual reliance shaped daily habits and influenced the decisions made for the empire, even during moments of rest. Clarity was sought through ritual and the interpretation of omens. The personality blended martial vigor with a profound sense of religious duty and personal destiny. The weight of leadership rested heavily upon the shoulders as travel continued from Greece to India. Many wounds were faced during these long and arduous campaigns that stretched across continents. Each injury served as a reminder of the physical toll exacted by the relentless pursuit of glory. Despite these scars, the armies continued to lead with unwavering determination and strategic brilliance. The early victory at the Granicus established the Macedonians on enemy soil and allowed for replenishment. The legacy extended far beyond the battlefield into the realm of ideas and lasting memory. The name became synonymous with greatness and the pursuit of the impossible. Even today, the story captures the imagination of people around the world. The quiet rooms of ancient palaces once echoed with the sounds of courtly life and military planning. Sunlight filtered through high windows to illuminate mosaics depicting scenes of hunting and battle. The air smelled of olive oil and dried herbs used in daily rituals. Stone columns stood in orderly rows, casting long shadows across polished marble floors. Vases filled with water sat on low tables, reflecting the soft light of oil lamps. The silence of these spaces offered a moment of peace after the chaos of war. Visitors walked slowly through the halls, tracing the carvings on the walls with their eyes. The craftsmanship of the artisans revealed a deep appreciation for beauty and order. Every object in the room served a purpose while also contributing to the overall harmony of the space. The legacy remained embedded in these quiet corners of history. The silence of the room was profound, broken only by the soft rustle of linen curtains moving in a faint breeze. Outside, the Euphrates River flowed with a slow, rhythmic sound that seemed to echo the breathing of the sleeping city. The stars began to appear one by one in the deepening indigo sky, marking the night with their distant, unblinking light. This was a place of great history, where empires had risen and fallen under the same eternal sky. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of memory, yet it felt peaceful and undisturbed by the turmoil of the world outside. The room remained a sanctuary of calm, where the past and present merge. In the quiet darkness of the evening, the death occurred in 323 BCE, with the end coming between sunrise and sunset on the 11th day of June, based on Babylonian astronomical data. The sudden departure left a vast empire without a clear successor, forcing the Macedonian generals to accept Alexander IV as joint king with Philip III Aridaeus. The immediate result of the subsequent wars was a Macedonian victory and the beginning of the Hellenistic period. This era saw the Battle of Gaugamela unseat the Persians as the greatest power in the ancient world. The victory at Gaugamela spread Hellenistic culture across a vast new empire. The establishment of settlements in the upper satrapies facilitated cultural interaction between Greeks and local populations. After the return from India, the need to reorganize the state became urgent. In some satrapies, the governors and military commanders had taken advantage of the many years when the leader was absent. A charismatic model was established that shaped the concept of kingship and propaganda for successors. The legacy endured long after the physical presence faded from the ancient world. Historians later analyzed the campaigns to understand the mechanics of rapid imperial expansion. The narrative of the life became a template for future leaders seeking to emulate the glory. Generals and kings studied the tactics and the ability to inspire absolute loyalty among the troops. The fusion of Greek and Eastern traditions created a new cultural synthesis that defined centuries of history. The oil lamp on the low table burned with a steady and unwavering flame in the stillness. The room felt like a sanctuary from the chaos of the world beyond, a place of rest and reflection. The stones of the walls held the warmth of the sun, radiating a gentle heat that soothed the spirit. Outside, the birds had ceased their singing, and the world seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the coming night. The atmosphere was one of profound peace, where time moved slowly and the cares of the day faded away. The quiet presence of the past lingered in every corner, offering a sense of continuity and stability. This was a moment of stillness in a world that was often in motion, a pause in the grand narrative of history. The room remained unchanged, a silent witness to the events that had unfolded in the years before. The light continued to shift, marking the passage of hours without urgency or fear. The dust motes danced in the beam of light, moving with a slow, lazy grace that matched the rhythm of the night. The fabric of the curtains breathed gently with the air currents, a soft sound that filled the silence. The floor was cool to the touch, made of smooth stone that had seen countless footsteps. The walls were thick and solid, built to withstand the passage of time and the weight of history. The window frame was carved from dark wood, polished by years of handling and care. The view outside showed the dark shapes of trees and the faint glow of the city lights in the distance. The air was still and heavy, carrying the scent of the river and the earth. It was a perfect moment of rest, a pause in the endless flow of time. The dust has settled on the road that wound through deserts and mountains, leaving behind a silence that feels heavy yet complete. My name became a story told by mothers to children, a whisper in the marketplaces of cities I never built with my own hands. The paintings that followed my life were not made by my own fingers, but by hands that sought to capture a spirit that had already flown away. I watch these images from a place where time moves like a slow river, watching how the light changes on canvas and stone. The first portraits were simple, carved in stone or stamped on metal coins that passed from hand to hand in the bustling streets of ancient cities. They showed a young man with a turned head, eyes looking toward something far beyond the horizon. Oil paint later brought a new depth to these faces, allowing artists to mix colors that captured the warmth of skin and the coolness of armor. The blend of Greek and Eastern styles created a visual language that spoke to people who had never met me, bridging the gap between distant cultures. Each generation added its own layer of interpretation to the myth, turning a man into a symbol of human ambition and potential. The story of my conquests was retold in mosaics, frescoes, and tapestries, each medium adding a new texture to the memory. Scholars and artists alike studied these works to understand the values of the societies that created them, finding in my image a reflection of their own dreams. The visual record serves as a bridge between the ancient world and the modern imagination, connecting the past to the present in a quiet, enduring way. In a quiet corner of a museum in Paris, a large oil painting hangs on a wall where the light falls softly and evenly. The frame is dark wood, worn smooth by the touch of countless hands that have reached out in wonder. The canvas depicts a moment of stillness amidst the chaos of battle, with horses frozen in mid-stride and soldiers locked in a silent embrace. The colors are rich and deep, the reds of the cloaks and the gold of the armor glowing under the gallery lights. Dust motes dance in the beams of light that filter through the high windows, swirling around the figures on the canvas. The texture of the paint is visible in the folds of the fabric and the muscles of the horses, showing the care with which the artist worked. The silence of the room allows the viewer to step back from the noise of the world and contemplate the history trapped in the image. It is a place where time seems to stop, where the violence of the past is transformed into a peaceful reflection on power and loss. The painting stands as a permanent record of a story that began in a small kingdom in the north, now preserved for all to see. The artistic legacy of Alexander continued to inspire generations of painters and sculptors long after the last breath was drawn. My image remained a subject of fascination for artists in the Renaissance and beyond, evolving as new materials and methods were discovered. The techniques used to depict me changed over centuries, from the rigid forms of ancient mosaics to the fluid brushstrokes of modern oil paintings. Artists studied the ancient coins and statues to understand the original style of my portraits, trying to capture the essence of a man who had conquered the known world. The blend of Greek and Eastern elements in my iconography remained a unique feature, creating a visual language that spoke to a wide audience across the ages. This synthesis of cultures created a bridge between the ancient world and the modern imagination, allowing people to see themselves in the story of a great king. The narrative of my conquests was told through a variety of artistic media and styles, each generation adding its own interpretation to the enduring myth. The study of these artworks reveals much about the values and aspirations of the societies that created them. showing how art has the power to preserve history and shape memory. The images of Alexander the Great endure as symbols of human potential and ambition, inviting us to reflect on the nature of leadership and the cost of greatness. One surprising fact remains hidden in the quiet corners of history: the famous mosaic depicting the Battle of Issus. Discovered in the House of the Faun in Pompeii, dates back to the 2nd century before the Common Era, yet it was based on a Greek painting from the 4th century, showing how quickly the image of the king was translated into stone and passed down through generations. This intricate work of art provided a glimpse into how my image was preserved in domestic spaces, standing as a testament to the skill of ancient mosaicists and their patrons. A painting by Nicolaes Pieterses Burcham depicts the victory of Alexander over Porus in a different style, using light and shadow to create a sense of movement and drama on the canvas. These varied artistic representations highlighted the multifaceted nature of my historical persona, with each artist bringing their own interpretation to the story of the great conqueror. The Battle of the Granicus was the first victory won in the invasion of the Persian Empire, an early success that established a reputation as a formidable military leader. The battle very nearly cost my life during the fierce fighting on the riverbanks, yet the survival in such a dangerous encounter added to the legend of invincibility. The text mentions the Battle of Issus as a key event in my life and career, a confrontation that further solidified control over Asia Minor and the Persian territories. The artistic record of these battles often focused on the heroism of the king, emphasizing bravery and strategic genius in the face of overwhelming odds. The visual culture of the time served to legitimize rule and expand influence, with portraits circulating among soldiers and allies to reinforce presence across the empire. The style of these images evolved as the empire grew and absorbed new cultural elements, with Greek artistic traditions merging with Eastern influences to create a unique Hellenistic aesthetic. This fusion was evident in the clothing, armor, and settings depicted in the artworks, with the technique of the artists improving as they sought to capture the grandeur of the conquests. Frescoes and mosaics became more elaborate and detailed over the course of the reign, preserving the legacy not only in history, books, but also in stone and paint. My name became synonymous with greatness and the pursuit of the impossible, capturing the imagination of people around the world even today.